GameBuilder Studio.
Okay, the next major piece to this puzzle is getting the spawned enemy from its starting point and getting it to move along a certain path to the goal. Now, the enemy object has a number of components on it to handle that logic. It needs to be destroyed in a number of cases. When it's been hit by a bullet and it has no more health, or when it collides with the actual goal. And it also needs to redirect itself along the path depending on what waypoint it interacts with. So these little orange objects here are waypoints that are numerically numbered in order. And there's a reason why I have an _1, _2, etc. on each one of these objects, because we're going to use something called concatenation in order to find the next waypoint in its correct order, depending on where the enemy object is. So when the enemy is spawned, it's spawned from the starting waypoint, and it moves in a direction. It finds the next waypoint based on an index, and that index is kept on the properties of the enemy. There's an enemy speed that determines how fast it's moving. There's an angle to the next waypoint, which we will calculate an angle and then pass that to a move action. And there's the current waypoint index, which is incremented every time it hits a waypoint. It gets incremented, and we'll use that index to find the next waypoint object and perform the calculation of the current waypoint's position relative to where the enemy is, in order for us to know where to move the enemy object. And this is the enemy health object property. So once this gets below 1, so once it hits 0, this enemy will be destroyed. Now the main logic is here on Waypoint Reach. Whenever it collides with a waypoint, so an object with a waypoint tag on it, and I have inside of settings, on the engine tab, I have a number of object types: enemy, bullet, waypoint, and goal, because we're going to do some collision filtering. Now, anytime it hits a waypoint, which are these little orange squares, it's going to do some calculations. It's going to increase the waypoint, increment it by 1. So the property on the enemy's property, current waypoint, increase it by 1. Then we're going to use that property inside of an expression, and we're going to use concatenation. So there's a global entity object property right here, and on that property there's a list of all of the objects inside of a game by name. So we're going to start the string off with waypoint _, and then we're going to use that index and concatenate that onto the string using a plus sign, in order to make up the name waypoint _1, waypoint _2, waypoint _3, etc. And that's how we will find the next waypoint that we need to calculate the angle toward. And we put braces, we put an open bracket rather, around this string, and that will allow GameBuilder Studio to dynamically reference that object without knowing beforehand what that object is. It's going based on the object's name. And then we can continue with the syntax of dot spatial dot position. So that's going to grab each waypoint's position as we go. Now, by doing this, you can access any component on this dynamic object using the same dot, whatever the component name is, dot, whatever property you want to access. And then of course we're using the enemy's current position to determine in what direction the enemy needs to move going forward. So that is the angle that's calculated. We put that angle on the angle to next waypoint property, which is then fed into a move action right here, the direction angle of the move action. And then we also pass the speed of the enemy so that the move action knows how fast to move that object. And that's pretty straightforward. We do those, execute those actions, And each object, as it moves along the path, it will hit this object, and that's why these objects are offset a bit. If I turn on collision shapes, you'll be able to see the edge of the collision shape for the waypoint. And as the enemy, the right edge of the enemy collides with the edge of this waypoint, it will then trigger all of these waypoint reach actions to determine where to go next. And it perfectly goes along the path as we set up. So if I rearranged any of these objects, the path will be altered. And this is a way to handle pathfinding and getting objects to move along a certain path without actually having a full pathfinding algorithm in place. And that's pretty much how we get this turret, this tower defense game assembled. And this wave timer here is used to, to execute or spawn the enemies every so often. Every 1 second, it creates another entity. It calls the spawn entity action, and it creates an enemy at the starting waypoint, which is this object that we create, which is the source waypoint. And that's pretty much your tower defense game. Now you can add a ton of polish to this and add varying levels of speed for the enemies, varying damage properties for different turrets, however you see fit to add additional functionality to your game. And as I place turrets, they'll find the different enemies within range, and they will fire on those enemies. And the goal is to try to get all these objects before they reach the goal here. And of course, if objects were to reach this goal, you could have a property that decreases, and if the player lets too many enemies get to the goal, you can end the game. Game's over, and you can reset everything and start the game over. But that's your basic tower defense game right there. Thanks for watching.